Hey there, everybody. This is Leilani, and this is the channel, The Magical Solution. And I am so excited that everyone is here right now. We are live on YouTube, on TikTok, and on Facebook, my private Facebook group, The Magical Solution. This is how we grow. You guys, I'm so excited because tonight is the night. It is the finale. We are on the final chapter of Allan Kardec's The Spirit Book, and I am so excited because this thing, look at this, we did it. We finally did it. And those of you who have been with me throughout the whole time, thank you so much. I know you are also excited that we're going to be starting the Mediums book next week. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, do not fret. All of the previous chapters are on my YouTube channel, The Magical Solution. So by all means, take your time, catch up, do what you got to do. That's what they're there for. Now, there is going to be a quick schedule change. So normally we've been reading this book live on Sunday nights, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But starting next Sunday, I'm going to be opening up my live interview show, my podcast show. And I'm going to have my first guest back on our anniversary, Dominic Guerrero. He was here last year, and we talked about Pombagira, the goddess, this spirit of Brazil, and it was a great live. Everyone really enjoyed it, so I said, you know what? If I'm going to come back, I need to have him back. So he's one of my first interviews, and this time we're going to be talking about saints, and not just any saints, suspect saints. And we'll get into, what that all means that night, but make sure you tune in. It's next Sunday, the 23rd, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to be doing that and talking with Dominic about that. Now, the day that I decided to change the date so that we can start the Mediums book, we're going to start that next Thursday. Okay, so it'll be Thursday let me get the exact date for you. Thursday the 20th, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we're going to start this book. So, without further ado, you guys, let's get this started, okay? Let me make sure I have all my things in place. Everything's in place there. All right, here we go. So, last time we were together, we were on the last chapter, but we ran out of time. So, we're kind of in the middle of the last chapter. So, just to recap the title of the last chapter and where we are, it is, oh wow, we read so much of it. It is Future Joys and Sorrows, and then the subcategories are Nothingness, the Future Life, the Intuition of Future Joys and Sorrows, God's Intervention in Punishments and Rewards, the Nature of Future Joys and Sorrows, Temporary Punishments, Expiations and Repentances, the Duration of Future Punishments, the Resurrection of the Flesh, and Heaven, Hell, and Purgatory. So that's the chapter that we're in. That's the final chapter. Now, the subcategory that we left off on is the duration of future punishments. So are we ready? Let's do it. Question 1003. Is the duration of the suffering of the guilty in the future life arbitrary or subordinate to some law? God never acts capriciously, and everything in the universe is ruled by laws that reveal the divine wisdom and goodness. Question 1004. What determines the duration of the suffering of the guilty? The length of time required for their improvement. Since the state of suffering or happiness is in proportion to the spirit's degree of purification, the duration and nature of its suffering depends on the time it takes to improve itself. As the spirit progresses and its sentiments become purer, its sufferings diminish and are changed to the same extent. And that's actually a quote from St. Louise, sorry. Question 1005. Hi, Eric. Does time for a suffering spirit seem longer or shorter than when it is incarnate? It seems longer, because sleep does not exist. It's only for spirits who have reached a certain degree of purification that time is effaced, so to speak, in the face of the infinite. 1006. Can the duration of a spirit's suffering be eternal? Now, here's a really great question, because when we look at Christian belief, this idea of suffering or happiness, in heaven or hell, is an eternal process. Like, no matter what you did, if you did something bad, you were going to hell eternally. And if you did something good, if you were a good person, you were going to heaven eternally. There was no, like, duration of time. Okay? So that's kind of where he's coming from with this question. And the answer is, of course. If it were to remain eternally bad, that is to say, if it were never to repent or improve itself, it would then suffer eternally. However, God has not created beings eternally devoted to evil. They were only created simple and ignorant, and all of them must progress over a longer or shorter period of time according to their own free will. This will and can be belated to various degrees, just as there are children who are precocious to various degrees. Sooner or later, however, it will manifest itself by the irresistible need the spirit feels to leave its state of imperfection and to be happy. The law that governs the duration of suffering is therefore eminently wise and beneficent. It subordinates that duration to the spirit's own efforts, never depriving of its free will. If it makes a bad use of it, it will have to bear the consequences. All right? 1007. Are there spirits who never repent? Meaning, like, are they never feeling bad or ever sorry for what they did? Like, when they cross over, are they going to be forever like, I did what I did? There are spirits who put off their repentance, but supposing that they will never improve would be to deny the law of progress and to assert that the child will never become an adult. Question 1008. Does the duration of punishments always depend on the spirit's own will, or are there punishments that are imposed on it for a specific length of time? There are punishments that can be imposed on it for a specific length of time, but God but God who wills only the good for God's creatures always welcomes its repentance. The spirit desires to improve. It's never fruitless. Okay? So it's this idea that, okay, yeah, spirits do bad things. And yeah, they might be stubborn. And yeah, they might go through a minute of like denial and not wanting to admit that they're wrong or not wanting to feel sorry or repent for what they did. But the innate nature of the spirit is to progress. The nature of the spirit is to move closer to God. And so by that very nature, there will come a point once the spirit just simply acknowledges everything and admits to everything, will then move up to the next level and keep going. So there is a sense of we have to believe that people are innately good in a way, no matter what they've done, right? Question 1009. Thus, I'm so sorry by this loud noise. My neighbor is deciding to mow the lawn at this very moment. Never having done this before, but just decided to do it today. So I apologize. I'll speak up a little bit if you can't hear me, okay? Thus, the punishments imposed are never eternal. So that's the question. The punishments are never eternal. Consult your own common sense and reason and ask yourself whether an eternal condemnation for a few moments of error would not be a negation of God's goodness. In fact, What is the duration of a life, even if it were to last hundreds of years, in comparison to eternity? Eternity! Can you understand that word? Suffering and torture without end and without hope for only a few wrongs? Does not your reason reject such an idea? That the ancients saw in the master of the universe a terrible, jealous, and vindictive God is understandable. In their ignorance, they attributed the human passions to the deity, but that is not the God of Christians, who exalts love, charity, mercy, and the forgetfulness of offenses as the highest virtues. Could God lack the qualities that God demands as a duty? Is there not a contradiction in attributing to God both the infinite goodness and the infinite vengeance? You say that above all, God is just and that humans do not understand the divine justice. Justice, however, does not exclude love, and God would not be loving in condemning most souls to a horrible and everlasting punishment. Could God make justice obligatory for everyone if they were not given the means to comprehend it? I mean, besides, it's not justice sublime when allied with goodness. It makes the duration of punishment depend on the efforts of the guilty to improve themselves. Therein, you will find the truth of the precept, to each according to his own deeds. So now he begins to show a bunch of quotes. So it seems like the line of questioning is over for this chapter or this particular segment of the chapter. And now we are going to see a bunch of quotes. So the first quote is from Saint Augustine. Quote, through all the means within your reach, strive to combat and to eradicate the idea of eternal punishment, a blasphemous notion against the justice and goodness of God and the most abundant source of the incredulity, materialism, and indifference that have pervaded the masses from the time their intelligence began to develop. Even the remotely aware spirit quickly comprehends this monstrous injustice. Its reason rejects it, and then more often than not, the spirit equates the eternal punishment that it rejects with the God to whom it attributes this condemnation. From this arise the innumerable ills that have fallen upon you, and whose remedy we have come to bring you. The task we have pointed out will be much easier to accomplish, since the authorities from whom the defenders of this belief have sought support have avoided a formal pronouncement on this regard. Neither the councils nor the church fathers tackled this serious question, following the evangelicals themselves and taking Christ's allegorical words literally. If Christ did, in fact, threaten the guilty with inquenchable eternal fire, there is absolutely nothing in Christ's words that proves they are condemned for all eternity. Poor, lost sheep, learn to behold the Good Shepherd, who approaches you and who, far from wanting to banish you forever from his presence, comes to find you in order to lead you back to the fold. Prodigal children, leave your willful exile. Turn your path towards the Father, who's opened his arms to you and who is always ready to celebrate your return to his family. Now we have another quote. This quote comes from Laminals. Here we go. Quote, wars of words, wars of words. Have you not shed enough blood? Are the inquisitional fires to be rekindled once again? You argue over expressions such as eternal suffering, eternal punishment. Do you not know that what you understand today by eternity was not understood in the same way by the ancients? Let theologians consult the sources, and like you, they will discover that the Hebrew text does not give the word the same meaning that the Greek, the Latin, and modern translations have rendered as everlasting and unpardonable punishment. The eternity of the punishment corresponds to the eternity of the evil that has occurred. Yes, so long as evil exists among humans, punishments will continue. It is in this relative sense that the sacred text should be interpreted. Eternal punishment is therefore relative, not absolute. A day will come when all humans will don the garments of innocence through repentance, and on that day, there will be no more groaning or gnashing of teeth. It is true that your intelligence is limited, but even at this stage, it is still a gift from God, and with the help of reason, there will not be one single human of good faith who could possibly understand eternal punishment in any different way. Eternal punishment, how could that be? Only if we believed that evil was also eternal. But only God is eternal and could not have created eternal evil. If such were the case, we would have to deny one of the most beautiful divine attributes, supreme power. For God would cease to be supremely powerful the moment he introduced a destructive element into creation. Humanity, no longer immerse yourself, your somber glance in the depths of the earth searching for these punishments. Weep, hope, expiate, and take comfort in the thought of a God who is infinitely good, absolutely powerful, and essentially just. End quote. Now we have a quote from Plato. Quote, the objective of humankind is to gravitate towards divine unity. For divine unity to occur, three things are necessary: justice, love, and knowledge. There are three things that are contrary to and oppose this unity: ignorance, hatred, and injustice. I must tell you that you lie about these fundamental principles when you compromise the idea of God by exaggerating this severity. Furthermore, you doubly compromise it when you allow the spirit of the creature to think that the creature itself possesses more clemency, gentleness, love, and true justice than you attribute to the infinite being. You destroy the very idea of hell by rendering it as ridiculous and unacceptable to your minds as the horrendous spectacle of the executions, the burnings at the stake, and the tortures of the Middle Ages in your hearts. At that time, when blind reprisals have been forever banished from human laws, do you expect to uphold them as ideal? Believe me, brothers and sisters in God and in Jesus Christ. Believe me, and either resign yourselves to letting all the dogmas you hold to be unalterable perish in your hands, or breathe new life into them by opening them up to the benevolent explanations good spirits are now giving concerning them. The idea of hell with its glowing furnaces and boiling cauldrons might be tolerated or admissible in a mythological age. In the 19th century, however, it is nothing more than an empty phantom that only serves to frighten little children who will no longer believe in it once they have grown up. If you persist in such a frightening mythology, you will engender disbelief, the origin of every sort of social upheaval. I tremble at the idea of an entire social order shaken and crumbling upon its very foundations for lack of a penal sanction. People of ardent and living faith, vanguards of the day of the light, let us join efforts not to maintain old fables that are now discredited, but to revitalize the true penal sanction under forms that correspond to the customs, your sentiments, and the enlightenment of your era. Who, in fact, are the guilty? Those who, through a transgression, through a wrong impulse of the soul, have distanced themselves from the objective of their creation, with constance in the harmonious cultivation of goodness and beauty as idealized by the human archetype, the good man Jesus Christ? What is punishment? Is it the natural consequence of that wrong impulse, the amount of pain necessary to dissuade the guilty from wrongdoing through the trials of suffering? Punishment is the good that arouses the soul through its affliction to turn towards itself, to return to the path of salvation. The objective of punishment is none other than rehabilitation and redemption. Wanting punishment to be eternal for a wrong that is not eternal is to deprive of it reason to exist. Truly, I say to you, stop comparing eternity in terms of the good which is in the essence of the Creator, with evil, which is in the essence of the Creator. An approach that ends up creating unjustifiable penalties. Rather, I affirm that gradual diminution of punishments and penalties through successive reincarnations, and you will consecrate divine unity through reason and sentiment. End quote. Now we have a quote from Paul the Apostle. Humans are stimulated to morality and turned from evil by the lure of reward and the fear of punishment. But if such punishment is represented in a way that defies reason, it will yield no influence. Rather, it will be rejected in its totality, form and foundation. However, if the future is presented under a logical form, it will not be rejected. And Spiritism provides such an explanation. The doctrine of eternal punishment, in its absolute sense, makes the supreme being an implacable God, an implacable God. Would it be logical to say that a king is very good, very benevolent, and very indulgent, that he only wants the happiness of all around him, but that he is at the same time jealous, vindictive, inflexible, and that he punishes 3/4 of his subjects with a maximum penalty for any offense or infraction of his laws, even when they have broken them without having been aware of them? Would that not be a contradiction? How could God be less than what a human would be? Another contradiction is presented in this case. Since God knows everything, then God knew while creating his soil that it would fail. From form to its formation, it was destined to eternal unhappiness. Is that possible? Is it rational? With the doctrine of relative punishment, everything is set aright. God undoubtedly knew that the soul would fail, but gave it the means of enlightening itself through its own experiences and through its own errors. It would have to expiate such errors in order to establish itself in the good. But the door of hope would not be closed forever. God made the moment of its liberation depend on the efforts it makes to attain it. This is something that all can understand and the most meticulous logic can accept. If future punishment had been present in this way, there would be a lot fewer skeptics. The word eternal is almost always employed figuratively in common language to designate something of a long period of time, of which the end is not foreseen, although it is very well known that there will in fact be an end. We speak of the eternal snows of the high mountains and the poles, for instance, although we know, on the one hand, that the physical world could come to an end, and on the other hand, that the state of those regions could be modified by a shift in the Earth's axis or some other cataclysm. The word eternal in this case does not mean infinite duration. When we suffer some long-term illness, we say that it is eternal. So why wonder when spirits who have suffered for many years, centuries, and even thousands of years speak of it as being eternal? Above all, we must not forget that their imperfection does not allow them to see the end of their afflictions. They believed they will suffer forever, which is in itself punishment for them. Furthermore, the doctrine of physical fire, of furnaces, and of tortures borrowed from Tartarus, of paganism, has been completely abandoned nowadays by liberal theology. Only in certain denominations are such terrifying allegories and images still presented as literal truths by some individuals who are more fanatical than enlightened. This is all very wrong. Because young imaginations, once past terror, will most likely become skeptical. Today, theology recognizes that the word fire is employed figuratively and should be understood as mental suffering. Those who, like us, have followed the incidences of the life and sufferings beyond the grave through spiritist communications have been convinced that, though not physical, they are no less poignant. Even regarding their duration, some theologians are beginning to accept the narrower meaning indicated above, and in fact, they think the word eternal could refer to the penalties per se as the consequence of an immutable law and not to its application to each individual. On the day when religion accepts such an interpretation, as well as others that are also the consequences of the progress of enlightenment, it will bring back many lost sheep to its fold. Okay, we are now on the subcategory of the resurrection of the flesh. Question 1010. Is the doctrine of the resurrection of the flesh a reference to reincarnation as taught by the spirits? So what he's asking is Jesus' resurrection, right? Resurrection of the flesh is when Jesus came back. So he's asking, is that like a metaphor? Is that sort of the way that, a spiritist can teach of reincarnation? How could it be otherwise? This expression is similar to so many others that only appear to be nonsensical to those who take them literally are driven by disbelief. However, give it a good logical interpretation, and those whom you call free thinkers will accept it without difficulty precisely because they are able to make sense of it. Make no mistake, such free thinkers want nothing more than to believe, like everyone else, perhaps even more so. They long for the future, but they cannot accept what is absurd to reason. The doctrine of the plurality of existences confirms to the justice of God, and it alone can explain what is otherwise inexplicable. How could you expect this principle not to be found in religion itself? Question 1011. Okay, then in the dogma of the resurrection of the flesh, does the church itself teach the doctrine of reincarnation? This is obvious. This doctrine is the consequence of many things which have gone unnoticed and which will soon be properly understood. Before long, the church will realize that Spiritism relates at every step to the very text of the Holy Scriptures. Therefore, the spirits have not come to subvert Christianity, as some claim. On the contrary, they have come to confirm and sanction it through irrefutable proofs. And since the time has arrived to replace figurative language, they speak without allegories and give things a clear and precise meaning that cannot be the object of any wrong interpretation. That is why it is simply a matter of time before there will be more sincerely religious and believing persons than there are today. Science has demonstrated the impossibility of resurrection according to the common idea. If the remains of the human body actually remain homogeneous, even though dispersed and reduced to dust, we might conceive of their being reunited at some determined time. But such is not the case, however. The body is composed of diverse elements: oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, carbon, etc. Through decomposition, these elements are dispersed and will serve to form new bodies in such a way that the same molecule of carbon, for example, will have entered into the composition of many thousands of different bodies. We are only speaking of human bodies, leaving out those of animals. Consequently, an individual may have in his or her body molecules that belong to humans of earlier times. The same organic molecules that you absorb from your food, for instance, may have come from the body of an individual whom you have known, and so on. Since matter has a definite quantity, and since its transformations are indefinite in number, how could each one of those bodies be reconstituted with the same elements? This implies a material impossibility. The resurrection of the flesh cannot, therefore, be rationally accepted except as a figure of speech, symbolizing the phenomenon of reincarnation, and as such, there is nothing shocking to reason, nothing that may be contrary to the data of science. It is true that according to dogma, the resurrection will only occur at the end of time, while according to the Spiritist doctrine, it occurs every single day. Doesn't the image of the final judgment carry a great and beautiful metaphor, which, behind the veil of allegory, hides one of the most immutable truths that the skeptics will no longer reject once its true meaning comes to light? Meditate well on the Spiritist explanation concerning the future of souls and their destiny that results from the many trials they must undergo, and it will be apparent that, with the exception of it being simultaneous, the judgment in with which their sins are condemned are absolved is not a fiction, as disbelievers think it is. Let us further consider that this theory is the natural consequence of the plurality of worlds, nowadays perfectly accepted, whereas according to the doctrine of the final judgment, the earth is the only inhabited world. We already know from this book there are many inhabited worlds. Many. We're now on the subcategory of heaven, hell, and purgatory. Woo! Dense. Question 1012. Here we go. Are there circumscribed places in the universe that are intended for the punishments and pleasures of spirits according to their merits? We have already responded to this question. Punishments and joys are inherent to the degree of the spirit's perfection. Each spirit carries within itself the source of its own happiness or unhappiness. And since spirits are everywhere, there is no circumscribed or enclosed place for one or the other. Did you hear that? It's within. Heaven and hell and purgatory is within. There's no place that you go. Okay? As for the incarnate spirits, the degree of their happiness or unhappiness depends on the evolution of the world that they inhabit. So when he talks about incarnate spirits, he's talking about you and me, people who are incarnate in a physical body. Your perception of heaven, hell, happiness, unhappiness, torture, bliss is all contingent on the world that you create for yourselves. And that is why society and this idea of coming together as a people to create a utopian world is so important, because if you are seeing someone homeless on the street, if you are seeing a child without food, if you are seeing suffering, it's because you created that environment. You created that system to allow that suffering to occur. And so if you want peace, if you want joy, if you want bliss and happiness on earth, you have to be responsible for making that happen. So that's what he's talking about here. Accordingly, would heaven and hell not exist as humans have represented them? They are no more than figures of speech. Happy and unhappy spirits are everywhere. Nevertheless, as we have also told you, spirits of the same order gather together due to their mutual sympathy. When perfect, they can meet wherever they desire. The idea of a fixed place of reward and punishment exists only in people's imaginations. It proceeds from their tendency to materialize and circumscribe things whose infinite nature they cannot comprehend. Question 1013. What is it to be understood by purgatory? Like, what does that mean? Physical and mental suffering. It is a period of expiation. It is almost always on earth that you make your own purgatory, and that is where God enables you to expiate your wrongs. What is called purgatory is also a figure of speech that should not be understood as some definite place, but rather the state of imperfect spirits who are undergoing expiation until their complete purification raises them to the plane of the blissful spirits. Since this purification occurs over several incarnations, purgatory consists in the trials of corporal life. So in Hinduism, what my husband believes, there's a concept called samsara. Okay, it's this idea of sort of when you're being reincarnated, you're kind of coming back into this process, right? And purgatory in this sense is kind of the same thing. It is the process of reincarnation where you're just kind of coming back over and over and over and over again to expiate, to elevate your spirit. And this coming back to elevate is technically purgatory in that sense, because you still have trials to go through, you still have pain and suffering to go through, and you still have enlightenment to go through in order to get yourself up there. And so to many, that would be considered purgatory, right? So 1014, question 1014. How do you explain the fact that spirits who are known to be highly evolved because of the language they use have given to serious individuals answers on hell and purgatory that are in line with commonly accepted ideas? They speak a language that can be understood by the individuals who question them. When such individuals are highly imbued with certain ideas, these spirits do not want to shock them too suddenly in order not to offend their convictions. If a spirit were to forget about verbal precautions and to say to a Muslim that Muhammad was not a prophet, it would be very poorly received. Okay, well, we can understand this on the part of spirits who wish to instruct us, but how may it be explained that when questioned about their situation, spirits have responded that they were suffering the tortures of hell or purgatory? When they are of low order and are not completely dematerialized, spirits retain a portion of their earthly ideas and translate their impressions using terms that are familiar to them. They find themselves in surroundings that do not permit them to probe the future, except in a deficient way. This is the reason why errant or recently discarnated spirits usually speak just as they would have if they were still incarnate. Hell may be translated as meaning a life of extremely painful trials with the uncertainty that it will never end. And purgatory is also a life of trials, but with the awareness of a better future. Whenever you are suffering a great deal of pain, do you not say that you are suffering like hell? These are also nothing more than words uttered as a figure of speech. Question 1015. What should be understood by a tormented soul? An errant and suffering soul, uncertain about its future, and to whom you can provide the solace is frequently it frequently begs for when it comes to communicate with you. So basically, a tormented soul, what he's saying here is that they are a suffering soul who is seeking solace and is begging peace by trying to reach out to the other incarnate spirits. Question 1016. In what sense should the word heaven be understood? Do you believe that it is a place like the Elysian fields of the ancients, where all the good spirits are confusedly crowded together with no other concern that of enjoying eternal passive bliss? No, it is a universal space. The planets, the stars, and all the highly evolved worlds on which spirits enjoy all of their faculties without the tribulations of material life or the anguish inherent to less evolved stages. That's heaven. When your spirit has reached such an evolved state that you no longer have to worry about the sufferings of the material world, that's heaven. But it's not really a place, it's a state of being, right? So again, when you look at religions of the East and philosophies of the East, this is the state of the Buddha. This is the state of Christ consciousness. This is the state of, you know what I mean? And that takes many incarnations, many lifetimes to achieve. But don't give up. I mean, obviously, don't give up. You want to be your best version of yourself every lifetime that you're on here. That's the whole point, you know? 1017. Some spirits have said that they inhabit the fourth and the fifth heaven or dimension. What is meant by this? Y'all are hearing it right now, right? You go on Facebook, you go on TikTok, you go on Instagram, people are talking about, oh, 5D and 3D and 4D and all that, right? You ask them which heaven they inhabit because you have the idea of many superimposed heavens resembling the stories of a house. Thus, they merely responded according to your own language. However, for them, the words fourth and fifth heaven express different degrees of purification and consequently of happiness. It is the same when a spirit is asked if it is in hell. If it is unhappy, it will say yes, because for it, hell is synonymous with suffering, although it knows very well that it is not a furnace. A pagan spirit would respond that it is Tartarus. The same applies to other analogous expressions, such as the city of flowers, the city of the elect, the first, second, or third sphere, etc., which are no more than allegories employed by certain spirits, whether as figures of speech, whether from ignorance of the reality of things, or whether from ignorance of the simplest scientific concepts. According to the former, narrower idea of fixed places of punishment and reward, and especially according to the opinion that the earth was the center of the universe, and that the sky formed a vault in which there was regions of stars, heaven was placed above, and hell was placed below. Hence the expressions to ascend to heaven and in the highest of heaven and to be cast down to hell, etc., etc. Now that science has demonstrated that the Earth is no more than one of the smallest worlds among millions of others, which gives it no special importance, that is, that has traced the Earth's formation and described its constitution, that it has proven that space is infinite in such a way that there is neither up nor down in the universe. It has become necessary to reject placing heaven above the clouds and hell in the lower regions. And as for purgatory, no fixed place has ever been assigned to it. Concerning such matters was reserved for Spiritism to give the most rational, fundamental, and at the same time, the most consoling explanation to humankind. Thus, we can say that we carry our hell and our heaven within ourselves, and that we find our purgatory in our incarnation, in our corporal and physical lives. 1018. In what sense should we understand the words of Christ? My kingdom is not of this world. Like, what does that mean? Christ was responding figuratively. He wanted to say that he only reigned over pure, unselfish hearts. He is in every place where love and goodness rule. However, humans, greedy of the things of this world, are attached to the things of earth and not to him. Question 1019, which is our last question, you guys. Last question of this chapter. Here we go. Will the kingdom of the good ever be realized here on earth? The good will reign on earth when, among the spirits who come to inhabit it, the good ones outnumber the bad ones. They will then enable love and justice, the source of goodness and happiness, to reign on earth. It is through moral progress and the practice of the laws of God that humans will attract good spirits to the earth and repel the bad ones. However, the bad ones will only leave after humans have banished pride and selfishness. The transformation of humankind has been predicted, and the time has come for all progressive individuals to hasten it. It will be implemented through the incarnation of more evolved spirits who will comprise a new generation on earth. Then the bad spirits who are reaped daily by death and all those who try to deter the forward advancement of things will be excluded, for they will be out of place among humans of high morality, whose happiness they would not disturb. They will go to newer, less advanced worlds to fulfill pain-filled missions, where they will be able to labor for their own progress, and at the same time labor for the progress of their brothers and sisters who are even less advanced. Do you not see in such an exclusion from a transformed earth the sublime image of paradise lost? Also, do you not see in the humans who have come to the earth under similar conditions, bringing within themselves the seeds of their passions and the traces of their primitive inferiority, the no less sublime image of original sin? Consider it in this way. Original sin refers to the still imperfect nature of humans, who are only responsible for themselves and for their own wrongs, and not for those of their parents. All of you, men and women of faith and goodwill, work therefore with zeal and courage for the great work of regeneration, for you will reap 100-fold the grain of wheat that you have sown. Unfortunate are those who close their eyes to the light, for they are preparing long centuries of darkness and sorrow for themselves. Unfortunate are those who place all of their joys in things of this world, for they will suffer more privations than the pleasures that they have had. And above all, unfortunate are the selfish, for they will not find anyone to help them bear the burden of their miseries. And that, my friends, is the end of this book. Now, there is a conclusion. We could read the conclusion if you want me to, because we have 15 minutes left. But I never read the introduction for you guys, so I don't know if you want me to read the conclusion. But this book is a great one, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope that you enjoyed hanging out with me every week to get through this book together. And I really, really, really look forward to doing this one next. I really, really do. Now, let's get to some questions. Do you guys have any questions about what we've read so far? I know there was a lot of discussion here on TikTok I was seeing, so I'm really glad to see that. There's a lot of agreeing of this book, which is great. A lot of comparisons here. Yes, they believe that we have to usher heaven on earth, but like not in the weird, like apocalyptic kind of way. You know what I mean? Like it's not about forcing anyone to do anything because it acknowledges that we are growing in our own time. However, it talks about role modeling. It talks about being a good person, doing good unto others, showing love, charity, and justice. And through those actions, hopefully planting seeds among our brothers and sisters to do the same and follow suit. So that way we can start speeding up this process because it's really about numbers. The more people who do this, the faster we can elevate ourselves as a community, right? Ah, the hair witch, that's so great. I'm glad. Yes. All right. Well, I'm cutting it short tonight. I apologize. Normally we end at 8 o'clock. But thank you guys so much for joining me. And the next time we get together to read this, we are getting together on Thursday, May 20th, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. In the meantime, make sure you set your calendars for next Sunday, the 23rd, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, because I will be interviewing Dominic Guerrero on my YouTube channel, and we're going to be talking about saints, but not just any saints, suspect saints. What does that mean, Leilani? What does that mean? I don't know. You're just gonna have to go and watch it on that night because we're gonna get in. All right. Thank you guys so much. Much love, much blessing, light, and progress to everyone. Good night.